Welcome back. All right, so I'm revisiting a list I made 5 years ago. We were in Idaho, we were on holiday, and of course, I was still doing videos while we were on holiday, including having the whiteboard, the whole bit, although the glare in that video, not great. Anyways, the 2018 list is before you. No, I didn't keep the board intact, and I'm not reposting it now. But what I've done is I've put that list back on the board because I've decided I'm going to update the list. 5 years later, I'm going to update the list. And so some of the names you see on this list will be lower, some you see on the list will be higher, and some aren't on the list as new names have taken over. One thing that stands out to me is no Stamkos. And I don't remember 5 years ago a lot of complaining about no Stamkos, but then again, it was 5 years ago. The channel was much smaller. So that being said, you'll notice number one on the list is Mario Lemieux. Now I'm going to do this differently. Normally, I go from 15 through 1. This one I'm going to do 1 through 15. So number one, because no one should be surprised, I wore the Mario Lemieux jersey. Mario Lemieux to me is still the best player ever drafted first overall in the National Hockey League. And if you're wondering where's Gretzky wasn't eligible for the draft because Peter Pocklington prevented it. But yeah, Mario Lemieux, the number one overall. And so, yeah, he stays in that spot. Thus the Penguins Lemieux jersey. I'm not even going to try to hide it. He was on a whole other level, won a couple of Stanley Cups as a player. He's got his share of Stanley Cups as an owner. And he even played while he was an owner for a brief period there. Lemieux's kind of done everything he can to keep the team in Pittsburgh. Number two on the list doesn't change either. Sidney Crosby may not have rewritten the record book because at his prime, that was during a lower scoring period than what we're going through right now in the National Hockey League. But if Sidney Crosby had played in the 80s, who knows? 200 points, absolutely possible. But that's just, we can speculate all day if we want. But Sidney Crosby, 3 Stanley Cup rings. They're trying to get 4 this coming season. We know the challenge that awaits them there. But I don't think there'll be any argument about 1 or 2. At 3 is where we might have an argument. So the last time I did this video was 5 years ago. Connor McDavid hadn't done any of the things he's done to this point, and yet I knew 5 years ago, I got to get McDavid on this list. He has to be on the list. So McDavid is now number 3, and I'm fine with him being number 3. Yep, Guy Lafleur, right. So Connor McDavid has not won the Stanley Cups that Guy Lafleur did, but he hasn't played on the teams Guy Lafleur did either. That Montreal Canadiens dynasty was absolutely amazing. Now, Guy Lafleur's role in that means that he stays at number 4, and I don't think there's any concern about him falling any further down from here if I do this list again in 5 years. But yeah, Guy Lafleur at number 4, Connor McDavid at number 3. I know there's no cup rings with Connor McDavid, but he's been fantastic. He is, a player who can hit 150 points every year. I did see a couple comments in my video where I was talking about players who recorded, I thought, too many points, probably going to drop next year. And I saw a few people saying, McDavid won't score that many next year. Right. I've been hearing that for years. Well, McDavid scored a lot because he was only playing the Canadian division. McDavid scores a lot because it's not the postseason. Oh, McDavid scored in the postseason. Well, he's not going to win a cup because it's just moving the goalposts. But Guy Lafleur at 4, McDavid at 3. I would imagine that'll cause some discussion. Number 5. So dropping down as a result of McDavid moving up is Denny Potvin. Denny Potvin, of course, the workhorse defenseman for the New York Islanders during their dynasty in the early 80s. And without Potvin, I don't think you have that dynasty in the early 80s. He was a linchpin on that blue line. And he is the one that Rasmus Dahlin was basically compared to when Dahlin was drafted. No pressure or anything, as I said at the time and have said ever since then. But Potvin, one of the best complete all-around defensemen in NHL history. And I know Ranger fans didn't like him, but I thought he was excellent. At number 6, and just dropping because of McDavid, is Alex Ovechkin. Ovechkin, it's only a matter of time before Alex Ovechkin is the all-time goals leader in the National Hockey League. I think we're probably a year and a half out, maybe 2 years, but it's going to happen. Ovechkin's going to be the all-time leading scorer, and we're going to act surprised when it happens. But yeah, Ovechkin for me at number 6 is still the guy. Which brings us to number 7, and this is where the debate gets renewed. So I'm sure the question will get asked, well, he wouldn't dare. He wouldn't dare. But I would. Austin Matthews at number 7. Matthews, almost 300 goals already. I don't see any reason he won't be a 500 goal scorer in the NHL. I think he'll hit 600 goals in the NHL. His goals per game is elite. His records during the regular season, absolutely fantastic. And his postseason numbers aren't bad. His postseason numbers are not fantastic, but they're not bad. I think that the criticism for Matthews is unwarranted, and in some cases, he plays for Toronto. I think a big part of it is he plays for Toronto. There's a lot of media attention towards Matthews. People get tired of hearing about him. But you hear about him a lot, yes, because he's in Toronto, but also because he's really quite good at the hockeying part of hockey. And so for me, Matthews is still there at 7. So at number 8, and moving up from number 9, this is where it gets interesting because Patrick Kane moves up from where I had him 5 years ago, and yet Kane being below Matthews is something that people are still like, no, I don't agree. And I get that. But again, for me, for my opinion personally, I think Kane's been an excellent player for Chicago for very many, many years. Currently, as I'm recording this, still a free agent. Probably will still be a free agent when this goes live because he's saying he won't sign a contract until he's healthy. But while Kane has been excellent for a near dynasty in Chicago, Matthews is just, to me, he's an elite player in the National Hockey League. And that's my honest opinion. That could change over the next 12 months, 24 months, but I would still have Matthews ahead of Kane. Number 9 on the board. He wasn't on the board at all 5 years ago. And I don't know that I could have made the argument for Stamkos 5 years ago either. Even though Tavares is here at 15th, and spoiler alert, Tavares is not in the top 15 this time around. But Steven Stamkos has proven since 2018, basically the 18-19 season, Tampa Bay's, sets records, and then the 19-20 and the 2021 seasons, they end up winning Stanley Cups. And Stamkos, whether he was playing in the 2021 playoffs, whether he was the emotional leader off the ice in 2020, both seasons he was an inspiration. And so Stamkos ends up number 9 on the board, and he's a 500 goal scorer. He's probably going to end up with about 600 before his career's done. Absolutely sensational player. So at number 10, not on the board the last time I did this either. So what's interesting is Nathan MacKinnon, to start out his career, was a bit of an underachiever. And when the channel started up, he was underachieving regularly. And it was a topic of conversation often. And then all of a sudden it clicked. And he's been fantastic for the last, 4 years? He's been absolutely sensational. So Nathan MacKinnon overall, I'm fine with having him at number 10. Look at the guys you're bumping down. Like, this is some of the all-time greats. I really do think that the era we're seeing right now in the National Hockey League is absolutely stellar. So number 11, dropping down from number 6. Gilbert Perreault. So Gilbert Perreault drops from 6. Matthews, of course, bumps him down. Kane's got the 3 Stanley Cups, and he's had an excellent run for a very long time. Stamkos, a couple Stanley Cups. MacKinnon, a Stanley Cup. And a huge part of the reason that they won that Stanley Cup, Gilbert Perreault had a Stanley Cup final, did not win a Stanley Cup. And he played through an era where he was overshadowed a bit by guys like, for instance, Guy Lafleur, Marcel Dion, and others. Is it fair that he's at number 11? Probably not, but here we are. Gilbert Perreault ends up at number 11, played his whole career in Buffalo. I watched him the last, 4 or 5 years of his career. I was watching hockey. He was an excellent player, and he didn't wait until he couldn't play anymore. He retired while he was still able to play. Number 12 on the board then, dropping down from number 7. So again, quite the drop in 5 years. And that's Matt Sundin. So Sundin, much like Matthews, I think there was a lot of criticism and still is because Toronto, right? But Matt Sundin, an excellent player in his own right, Hall of Famer. All of the guys on this board are either Hall of Fame level or they're going to be. So all of them either in the Hall of Fame or they're going to get there. That's basically what I'm saying. Matt Sundin, of course, one of those examples. And this is why number 1 draft picks are so coveted in the National Hockey League. Because generally speaking, your number 1 draft pick is a pretty solid player. And Matt Sundin, no exception. Number 1 draft pick with the Quebec Nordiques. ends up in Toronto in a trade that at the time people were like, is this going to work? And yeah, it did. It did. Sundin had a pretty good career for Toronto. Not too shabby. Number 13. One of my favorite players. I have one of his jerseys, of course. By which I mean I got a jersey with his name on the back, not that he wore it. So, Mike Modano, Dallas Star, his entire career until he played in Detroit and didn't quite get to 1,500 games, but for another time. But yeah, Mike Modano, fantastic career. Stanley Cup win in 1999. Was the face of the Minnesota North Stars, moved with the team to Dallas, became the face for the Dallas Stars. And so to me, Mike Modano at number 13, absolutely fantastic career. Number 14 on the board, dropping from number 10. If not for injury, if not for concussions, Eric Lindros might have been as high as 5th on this board. If it hadn't been for concussions and just injuries slowing him down, and I also think the fact the Flyers kept insinuating he was faking it, and so he was pressured to come back, I think, before he was ready. I really think Lindros would have had a top 5 on this board level career. Doesn't end up winning a Stanley Cup, moves around a bit towards the end of his career, but again, he was just desperately trying to hang on, and his body was betraying him at that stage in his career. But I still think it warrants being number 14 on the board. And number 15, this one I went back and forth on because Joe Thornton, no Stanley Cups, right? But Joe Thornton, one of the longest tenured players in NHL history, lots of points, over 1,500 points in his career. I bumped out Howard Chuck. Howard Chuck would be number 16 if this board went to 16. In fact, why don't we do a 16th on here? Because I feel like not having Howard Chuck on the board at all. Oh, look at that. Can I draw a 16? That's the question. Can THG actually write the number 16 on the board? Can he find one of his many items that he uses to erase the board? Yes, he can. Just took a bit. It was underneath my book. So, do I need a number 16? I think I do. So we go from 15, 5 years ago, to 16 now. I want Howard Chuck on the list. Dale Howard Chuck, of course, recently passing away tragically, but was a player that I absolutely loved growing up and was a dynamic player who, if he hadn't played for the Winnipeg Jets, who were a mediocre, middling team through most of his time there, if he had played with a team that went on runs to Stanley Cups and whatnot, I think he would have got more attention. But yeah, Howard Chuck absolutely has to be on the list. So dropping out of the list are Ilya Kovalchuk and John Tavares, and I'm okay with that. Kovalchuk, of course, the famous thing with him was the 2012-2013. 2013, he signed that contract with the Devils, right? 2012 or 2013. And then, yeah, that didn't go very well. If not for that, who knows? Kovalchuk might still be on the board. And Tavares, very good career, solid. I just can't make the argument for him ahead of Howard Chuck. I can't do it. So, overall, the debuts on this board are Austin Matthews, Steven Stamkos, and Nathan MacKinnon. So 2 Stanley Cup winners and a guy who really, really does have the talent. It's a matter of having the right team where he's able to win it. We'll see if that happens in Toronto or not. So there you go. The number 1 draft picks all time rated 1 through 16. The 2023 list compared to 2018. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.